we are all into cybersecurity, and we are interested in the conversation concerning personal data and privacy. So, with me today, we have Luis Enrique. Luis Enrique is one of those human beings who is fond of cybersecurity, just like any other guest who have on the show. So, it's nice to have people share their experiences. So, Luis, if someone is meeting you on the street, who is Luis?
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for the invitation. I am a university teacher. I teach at the University of Lille in France. Well, I got a lot of guest teacher invitations in general in Europe and America. And right now, I also teacher at in Ecuador, Universidad Andina Simón Bolívar. And right now, for the last 6 months, I'm the general director of data security and technological innovation in Ecuador. So actually, my life is in two continents. I travel a lot between.
Yes, I can hear France, Ecuador, France, Ecuador. That's your normal bread and butter.
Yes,
Okay.
mostly, but I also go different parts of the world. I'm really into infosec. I'm an infosec guy with double profile because I'm also a lawyer. So I combined it both 25 years ago, actually a long time ago, and I've been working in this field. I'm an expert on risk, basically. So I basically work a lot in the GRC, governance risk compliance, but from a different point of view. I'm a lot into measuring, and quantitative analysis. So that's what I do, basically. That's why my theory is personal data value at risk is about that. How can we actually get better compliance programs in practice, not just on the paper?
That's interesting. So you have brought something new to the table, which is you began as a lawyer, meaning legal. So how did that help when it comes to things like data privacy and all that? Was it easily relatable when it comes to cybersecurity?
Yeah, actually come from both backgrounds. So that's very interesting. I'm talking about 25 years ago, more or less. And yes, I was doing law studies. I was not really connected to IT law. We didn't have that, or at least we didn't think about IT law as something really important by the time. But actually, it has changed a lot in the last 15 years, especially. So I became into data protection. I was very interested in data protection and privacy, and especially how to combine with information security. That was my other background. So yeah, I have experience on the pen testing, also in vulnerability assessment. I work in digital forensics quite a few years also. So yeah, it was a good combination, and I think it's a very interesting combination because we need multi-dimensional backgrounds today. It's very, very important. Yeah, so yeah, I try to check somehow hacking regulation. That's what I call it, hacking regulation. Privacy.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it.
That's what I've been doing the last years.
Hmm.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Um, so how do you manage things to do with consent and privacy practices?
Yeah, that's quite a general question, but yeah, consent is about that you agree to do something. That's consent. If we're talking about IT, especially we're used to you just give your consent to anything. Most people don't read clauses, the contracts. They just say, okay, let's do it, because they just come with the platforms. But in general, data protection has a different perspective of civil law because it's more about you need to be informed, you need to explicit, and you need to really know opt-in any option. Let's say opt-in any option you have is different, so, like electronic commerce. So that makes a huge change. And then when you consent, it's also about knowing where my data is going to be, how the treatment, the processing is going to happen. All these conditions are just very important to think, okay, if I'm giving a consent. Also think about it sometimes that you need to have another option. If I tell you, say, do you consent? Let's think about a public administration. I don't have other option. Yes, of course I consent, otherwise I cannot do it. So the idea is trying to have this kind of
Balance. Mm.
proportionality test. Say,
Okay.
okay, proportional. Do I really need your, to get your face, your the biometry of your face to do something, let's say to just authentication. So actually, this is another dimension of IT security. I always say that there's no security without privacy, there's no privacy without security. Actually, comes in both ways, in both directions. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, do you find that in the perspective of a developer or one of your students who is planning on now starting up a company, and then definitely there is always that element of, putting standards in terms of privacy and data protection. What are those key things you would tell him to focus on? Are there specific frameworks we are looking at in terms of implementing at the beginning, so that we have a cohesion of, ensuring that there's more security in the organization?
Yes, actually, because of my role, I'm producing, I'm creating guides, uh, and the first thing is we need to fix privacy risk management because it's totally corrupted. What I mean with that is very amateur. Let's say cybersecurity is follows a different path, and cybersecurity is still amateur, but we're getting better at it. But privacy is still very unexplored, and that's why we need to fix many things. First of all, if we think about best practices standards, you always have ISO, of course, like say 27701. That is about, it's been changing during this time of this interview. But also NIST, we have different, also all the package, as I call it, from information security. We talk about COVID, we talk about OWASP, ASBS, OWASP top 10, of course. But they are not clearly adapted to data protection, because the problem with the data protection, it depends where you are. You have different laws, okay? You have different regulations. So even though that we think that the GDPR is like the global standard, it is not really. There are few changes from country to country. So that's why we need to track along the limitations of best practices standards. And in my opinion, there are two huge limitations there. Firstly, we have the problem that they are not adapted to the legal environment, the legal jurisdiction of any country in particular. They are generic purpose ones. And second one, that they don't give you metrics. Usually they just tell you what to do, and even though that they say, yeah, we tell you how to do, that's not true. I've been implemented auditor of ISO standards for many years, and it's not about that. It's more about creating a project, a security project, let's say, or a risk assessment project. That's the point here, but not really to tell you, okay, how I'm going to measure something, how I'm going to measure your privacy, how can I think, what is the impact of you, the consequence on your privacy if an IT risk happens. Let's say, think about denial service. You say the distributed denial service, okay, but this availability breach, what happened? What is your impact? So that's what I do. Also confidentiality, think about a Trojan, reverse access Trojan, for example. Okay, then they got to you, they got to your system, to your server, but what happened to your clients? So I'm in the middle of measuring what happens on the cybersecurity way of protecting assets, and what happened to the people, concerned people that also have this consequence in their rights. So it's quite interesting because we've been proposing multidimensional risk frameworks that actually are somehow far beyond the best practices standards that we use in cybersecurity.
Okay. Could you expand more to that multidimensional way of looking at security, not just looking at, okay, they have attacked us. When it comes to now the data of someone, and it's, most of the times you find that a threat actor will go into data exfiltration. So collect data, and now the person who is affected, how have you come up with regulations, or what are those things that you're thinking about which could help with the, ensuring that we are able to protect the data also, and also ensure that the user's information is easily protected also?
Yes, good question. Actually, the multidimensionality is very important in the risk models, very important. So let's think about the legal risk, okay? From the data subject's perspective, legal risk is that my confidentiality, let's say, is broken. It's because due to data breach. And then probably I get discriminated and I get a job. Let's say it's my health information. Consequences are there. And also there's a material impact. Yes. But if I talk from the institutional perspective, let's say we talk about the data processor, right, or data controller perspective is different because both roles, they we have a compliance risk that is more about an administrative fine that I will receive as a primary consequence. And that produces, of course, financial impact. And then secondary impact, I must say, reputation losses or perhaps productivity losses, it depends really the case. But data protection is a different way to approach because, well, I'm going too far just to answer the question. That's the point. We need to have this multidimensionality. So the main problem here is that can I do a privacy risk assessment if I don't know the impact? I cannot measure or estimate the impact on natural persons, just like you or me. That is the problem because firstly, people measures different. People have different, let's say, conviction, or they measure differently. They value differently their own privacy. Some people just share all their lives on TikTok, on Instagram. Other people really take care of it. Perhaps LinkedIn because we're forced to it. Otherwise, we don't have these kind of spaces, right? But then it's different perception. And secondly, the biggest problem is that there are some vulnerable groups that will have a higher impact. Let's say you have a data breach. It's not just about my loss of productivity or asset replacement, whatever. From an enterprise risk management perspective, it's also how it affects to the people, to the natural persons, and we can also measure that. So some people are especially vulnerable to data breaches. Some groups of people. Let's think about people with cancer. Let's think about people with pregnant women. Let's say it can really affect them. So these models work on that on both sides. That's a difference. And yeah, in the end, I must say that the key is risk. If the key is risk management, it's just about an extension to what we're used to cybersecurity risk management. I'm thinking about the other side. How do I value the impact on people? How can we measure it? That's why I came out with this theory of personal data value at risk, because it's about, I cannot really unveil what's the impact of each human being in this world. That's impossible, or probably really low probability to get it is and very costly. So much better what I developed is actually using machine learning models to train systems, and then just get through legal predictive analytics all the values and how actually authorities are measuring it. Regulators, how they measure the impact of natural people, because they have to do it anyway. When they create an administrative fine, they issue an administrative fine or any kind of sanction, they are doing that. So that intelligence is what I'm promoting, getting how they operate. So let's say from enterprise risk management perspective, it's not the same if you ask me, okay, what are my risk conditions in Spain? Which are my risk conditions in California? And which are my risk conditions in Germany? Or in France? It depends really where you are. And that's the point. We are talking about legal risk. So actually we need to be able to measure different perspectives. Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds to me like you're tackling or struggling with this issue of there are different users of these platforms and they cannot be measured equally because of their different strengths, their different monetary value, and their social proof or social capital, should I say, or the level of influence they have in the community. So the way we handle their data should be measured basing on that in order to ensure that there is less risk per se. Did I get you right?
Yeah, it's techniques are different because I experiment a lot. I did a lot of research in the field, and we have always in the context establishment phase of risk management. I'm talking about ISO 31000. you have first context establishment, and then you have a risk identification, then you have risk analysis, then you have risk evaluation, then you have risk treatment, right? So in the first phase, you always have to create this evaluation criteria of risk. Might be quantitative or qualitative, okay? So different ways to do it, especially you have two risk assessments that are somehow brothers or sisters, just too close, face to face. Firstly, privacy risk management is about the impact on the rights and freedoms of people. And then, okay, what it represents to me as a company. So then you have the cybersecurity risk assessment in front of. So what technique I use? Basically different criteria evaluation, but that needs to be compatible. Let's say you can have always dynamic criteria and static criteria. Static criteria is more about, let's say, you biometric data or sensitive data. Sensitive data is just higher impact. I can also consider some groups of people, like pregnant women, like elderly people, it's just higher, risk higher, or children, for example. Then we have how many records have been breached. That's very important too. Might be higher if I have a criteria, but it means it's static because it doesn't change. If I then in the risk treatment phase, I do things. Basically, I will try to just mitigate the probability of occurrence or the frequency of occurrence, but not the impact because the impact is static. Even though that you have 1% of probability, 1% probability, if it happens, the impact is very high. The difference with dynamic criteria when you use more in cybersecurity is you say, okay, what is for me, to me? They say low risk to me is less than $10,000. Middle risk is 10,000 to 50,000, and then you say high risk is 50,000 and higher. So actually, it depends really my risk appetite and my risk tolerance and risk capacity to determine that. So so basically, this is the difference. I have a third option for the privacy evaluation criteria that is about, okay, then I don't use static criteria, but I might just quantify how the authorities have decided about something. So we use natural language processing, neural networks, and then get, okay, what is really the sanctioning psychology of this authority? And that is data, personal data, value at risk. It's about what's involved here. And, we have three elements of a value at risk approach. First, and this comes from finance, of course, not for me. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So first, I'm interested. I know about you say your risk is high, your risk is medium, your risk is low. What I'm just about from an enterprise risk management perspective, what is the worst loss that I can get in a given time frame? Let's say, okay, you say, okay, $10 million, and I am in 1 year, and I am certainly, well, almost certainly sure that at a 95% that this is your worst loss. Let's say $10 million. So this confidence level is somehow very subjective, mainly in cybersecurity. Something I apply there is conformal prediction. Conformal prediction is really a revolutionary kind of methodology that with us is actually get the conformity of something with historical analysis. Let's say I have how much cost a data breach by malware during in April, in June, in May, July, in August. And they have an approach that, okay, then considering this data, I'm 90% sure that this could be the conformity for the next month. So basically, it helps a lot to prioritize, what is most important, what is most costly from enterprise risk management perspective. But well, I'm going too far. I'm getting too far in the interview, but that is the idea, basically. There's a third option, just thinking about how the authority think that is cost. And I know that some people say you cannot measure rights and freedoms, but in the end, judges and administrative authorities, that's what we have to do in the end of the day. Measure, you did something, you didn't comply, okay, what would be, the fine? Yeah.
Okay. That's a very interesting twist. Now, when it comes to decision making, we know most of the time it's usually upper management which deals with most of the high decision making. So how do we sell that in an upper management perspective to consider risk as a business facilitator like the way cybersecurity is? Because I'm sure with the risk, we also consider especially the privacy of the users. So if you're looking at it in the privacy perspective, how do we quantify that and how do we present it in a way that they can easily get a proper buy-in?
Yeah, that's a very good question. If we need to follow somehow a very logical roadmap. Firstly, if we follow the ISO stages, contextuality, identification, analysis, evaluation, it's very important because what happens is that in the privacy world, unfortunately, a lot of bad practices have been inherited in risk management. What do I mean? Let's say when you do a data protection impact assessment for the privacy of users, to estimate and control and mitigate, reduce, mostly there's a culture of checklist there. What it means that checklist, okay, do you have a consent form? Yes. Do you have a data protection policy or privacy policy? Yes. Do you have a cookie, this cookie policy?
Session expert, yeah. Mm.
So mostly they're not focused on really risk assessment. It's more a checklist, and this comes really as a bad practice from the 70s and the privacy impact assessments. Even some best practice, supposedly alleged best practices standards, uh, had it wrong. Let's say, so I don't want to say anyone in particular, but it's because it's very mature state of the art. What is the difference here? That I see that a lot of lawyers, especially, I would move from privacy to AI. That is today like something very important. What's going on right now with artificial intelligence impact assessments, right? Uh, I see that a lot. The legal world is trying to create methodologies. When what is really wrong is that we need to go back to the basics of risk management. This was created more than 200 years ago, as famous Douglas Hobart would say, in his book, The Failure of Risk Management. And yes, they developed how to estimate and measure risk. So what happened that cybersecurity somehow is still very, I would say, not that old, and we were used to. I remember because I used to apply that this 2 decades ago. Just to like, okay, I'm a management, so I will tell you, this is ISO, you have this, yes, you have this, you have this, yes, then you're protected, and that's totally fake. It's not about that. It's about, okay, let's use risk mechanisms to actually estimate the right values there. And it's something that not only the ISO, neither the NIST will give you. You have to do it by yourself. The metrics, data, and where I get data. Is this data trustable, trustworthy? And then how do I make a risk model with it? So this is the switch, and I think we are going on good, let's say, and good. It's a good change. I feel that people started saying, okay, but where you got this value from? Even I've seen, a lot of, I did a lot of audits to prices and public institutions, and they just have in the risk analysis part, they just have here, okay, you have 1 to 5. So what do you think about this? 1 to 5. I guess 4, I guess 2, I guess 3. And then I made the paper and that's it. You have risk analysis. That's totally fake. Where you got it? What is the rationale? We call it rationale. The truth, the justification behind. Where's the reason why I put this 4 or this 3? So actually, this is something that is not currently implemented in privacy domain. Very few people like me are working on that right now in the world. And it's very necessary. Otherwise, this is a cliche, this is very superficial, and doesn't really add value to your cybersecurity risk analysis,
Yeah, yeah, that is true. Now, if you look at it in a perspective that each and every organization has a different risk appetite and also different number of clients and definitely no company is cut out of the same cloth. So how do we ensure that they all follow the same criteria and they're all basing on the same thing? Because also we know developers, when it comes to developing, as long as something works, they don't mind about, the necessary security, especially when it comes to the privacy and all that. So could you shed light on how we could improve that also?
Yes, usually when you go to a CEO, he wants to hear how much does it cost, right? I want to know that so I can allocate resources. So you need to learn how to do real risk assessment, like what's the minimum and what's the maximum, give you ranges, how much might cost for you. And not only the administrative fine, as I already said, it's also about the reputation. So if I know that everybody knows I have a data breach, that costs money because I'm gonna perhaps I will lose clients, right? So the risk appetite, in general, I think there are two strategies for getting calibrated risk appetite. Firstly, you have what it's the tolerance, risk tolerance, right? That's more subjective. It's about what do I think? What do I think would be low for me? Let's say you use this labeling, the qualitative marks, very low, low, medium, high, very high. So what is that for me? It's not the same, let's say, for a huge company such as, I don't know, let's say Google, than for a very small company that sells you coffee in the street. No, so actually it's very different. Low is not the same for it. It depends really the context. So tolerance might be tricky if you don't have a good financial, I would say even actuarial science-based analysis, because then you can just say, okay, tolerance, it would be $1 million. Yeah, but what about if your sales are not going good lately? You know, probably just you cannot have this connection from the financial department. So I think it's much better to use what is called risk capacity. Risk capacity is about really how much can I lose and keep going. Just something very similar to what we use in business continuity management, right? I guess you're familiar with it. So it's the same. How much, when we talk about real time objective, how much time can I be offline and I can I can keep my business and go back to provide my services. It's the same here, When I do the criteria evaluation, I need to think how much can I really lose here? You know, probably 20,000, probably 200,000, you decide. But the difference that you have financial statements and you have risk quantitative analysis to know how much material damage can I get to my organization? And that is the main difference. So both are okay, but I think if we can get into risk capacity culture is much better because we really know how much can we afford for the value at risk.
Okay. In terms of we've already looked at the tolerance, already looked at the maturity of an organization, so it differs. So now let's dig deeper into privacy in terms of ensuring that we audit them very well. Because there is, someone saying they've done something like the way you said they've checked and they're like, okay, yes, this is this, and that. But now how do we ensure that we properly audit them so that we are able to, have to properly quantify this level of risk and the privacy of someone is being ensured that it's being maintained. Yeah.
Okay. I think a good beginning is to create risk models. And for that, it's the concept, right? The ontology of the concepts, how they connect to each other. So something I like in cybersecurity from many years ago, I'm part of the community, also the FAIR Institute in Washington, D.C. Well, it's actually a worldwide movement. Was about the FAIR model because they have this ontology of how to calibrate a range of material impact from any risk scenario. And what I did is actually just transpose, I would say not transpose, create something similar in the privacy domain with different risk models, and also do that in the predictive justice domain, basically how to assess or create assistance for judges and how to set up a fine. I would say a fair fine. So in this context, you have two kind of risks mainly in the privacy domain. The purely compliance risk, I call them. It's just about, let's say, they they wouldn't exist if the authority says nothing. For example, I have a consent violation. If the authority has not decided that I'm violating consumers' consent or data subjects' consent, then it doesn't exist really. Because first I need to get this observation by the regulator or the administrative authority. But secondly, we have in privacy the infosec risks. And this is something more interesting because any risk of information security becomes automatically a data protection risk or a privacy risk because we're dealing with information of people, right? That can be directly identified or indirectly identified. So how does this then modeling them? I may show you, but of course, it's a podcast. We don't have graphic view, but basically it's about modeling. So how can I model different perspectives? Let's say I want to model the impact on the rights of people. Yes. So I can just create a model to calibrate such impact first, considering the sanctioning psychology of the authority, and then just import to the FAIR model. Let's say FAIR model is the most popular worldwide. I import there as a secondary loss. Secondary loss because it depends on the reaction of the authority. First, primary laws following per model lines, guidelines. It's about productivity or incident response or asset replacement. It's something that really impacts me directly due to the cybersecurity incident. But secondary is the reactions of others, such as reputation. Let's say clients, they react. So they say, I don't want to deal with this enterprise anymore, let's say, or perhaps the authorities says, okay, you have a data breach. Okay, I'm going to issue a fine against you, right? So this is the perspective, modeling first privacy and then just exporting such results to cybersecurity risk modeling. That's what I do, and it works. It works much better than doing the opposite, because I think it's much better to think about my compliance risk as part of protecting my assets, and that includes all my financial health at the company.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you a few more. And when it comes to the challenges, what are those challenges you currently see many face when it comes to implementing privacy in an organization and managing the risk which comes with poor implementation of privacy?
Okay. First big problem is that we still have this mindset here that privacy is for lawyers and information security is for engineers. That's a big problem. Big problem, because those are totally interdependent. They are here. We're talking about the same thing. I prefer to call different dimensions of the same risk. So that's a big problem. And you see a lot of data protection officers that know nothing about information security. And you have some CISOs that know nothing about privacy and data protection. That is the biggest problem here. We need, I always encourage people to try to understand both worlds, because both are important here. Not just about protecting my assets, it's about the other side too. I need to protect people so I don't get a fine and I have a better reputation. So about strategies, I had to share a lot, but the first strategy for this problem is to try to create somehow this correspondence between departments. You need to work together. If you don't have someone that can have all this vision, just work together and learn together about it and try to apply the same or similar compatible evaluation criteria. That's very important, because if you don't have it, let's say here I work with quantitative, here with qualitative, and totally different, then how can I integrate them together? We need to put them together always. But that's a huge problem here. Second problem is we need to always think that risk does not come by default. And usually it's healthy to have an extra risk department, so they can be in charge of try to just combine to make teams follow the same rules, to understand that in the end, everything goes to the financial risk assessment of the company, right? And in the end, it's that. I don't say that. Madonna said that in the 80s, it's a material gain of song. I remember. It's true. It's about material damage. So very important to do that. And finally, I think here, very important part of this is trying to create your own privacy culture linked to InfoSec. That's the only way, you know. I've seen a lot of things, sometimes funny, during my life. Let's say go to huge companies, transnational companies, and they say, "Okay, I want you to implement here, to check or just update the 2701 ISO." Right? They say, "Okay, that's awesome, but why don't? How are you considering privacy here?" They say, "I know the lawyers already did that." I say, okay, let me see the policies. Nothing is interconnected. Let's say you have incident response plan, and there you're not considering the obligations to report to the data subjects and the authority when you have a potential.
Incident.
It's just a problem. And think about business continuity management. Your policies just say, okay, I keep the records. I have three backups, let's say, three backups in different places, right? But we're not really considering that when you delete personal information, or as in the USA, they say personal identifiable information when you're personal data, then you still have the backups. And the backups perhaps are just following the same guidelines, the backups are still with such problems. So that comes the problem. Why you will implement full backups when you need perhaps incremental backups? It makes you change. Privacy makes you change strategies, change operations, and change tactics. So that's why we need to put them together. Yeah.
Okay. Then, if someone wants to get into privacy and risk, where would you recommend them to start from? Are there particular courses, trainings? Are we looking at Security Plus? Where does someone start from?
Yeah, actually, you have three areas of study that have evolved different. Okay. First, you have data protection or privacy, comes from the legal side. Talk about that from last century, and you need to know about that processing, soft law and hard law. Then you need to have, of course, information security background. If you don't know what is confidentiality, what is integrity, what is availability, what is non-repudiation, you will struggle for sure. You need to know that at least in a general way. And why not take an ethical hacking course, a pen testing course, to really understand what the technicians are doing? It's very important. So try that. And thirdly, it's the most underrated one. And this is what I call we're beginning this transformation, in the privacy world. Is about risk management. You need to learn how to manage risk, and that includes analysis. I cannot. What is the problem today in the privacy world? That mostly say, okay, here you apply this tool, here you're the toolkit, privacy enhancing technologies. Here you match your data, here you do that. Really, like I said, just taxonomy, a catalog, as Jack Jones says, the FAIR Institute. I really share his mindset, because it's not about that. It's about doing some intelligence behind, because you always want efficient and costly solutions, cost efficient solutions. Cost efficient means that I will get different scenarios and I will save money, because risk management is for saving money and being more efficient. Yeah, right. So there's three areas you need to know about for doing effective privacy risk management.
Okay. Now, when it comes to the trends, what are the emerging trends and technologies that someone has to keep an eye on in terms of IT privacy and risk?
Yeah, of course, this goes totally linked to technology advances. Today we have artificial intelligence. Well, we have from Minsky times, of course, last century, but there are new risks here that not only change our privacy mindset, but also our information security mindset. Think about it. Just I remember I've been, working ethical hacking for the last 18 years. And 18 years ago, we were like, we must try to stop passwords and start doing biometrics. That's what we thought at the time. Biometrics. That biometric is the solution. But today, it's not that, it's not enough because then first it's more expensive, more expensive because it's sensitive data and the private from a privacy perspective. Secondly, you have artificial intelligence can help you. You're just not expert today. Anyone can do deep fakes. So I can get your biometrical data and just recreate something of you. Let's say your thumb, let's say your face, anything. So this is very important for both sides. I would say not just privacy, infosec, artificial intelligence, also about decision making for artificial intelligence, how we calibrate decision makers and what we do with it. It's very important because I see another vulnerability, and this comes from the data science world. The data science, they've been used to for many years. I mean, I've been in the data science world the last 25 years. Uh, I started doing linear regression, all this econometrical stuff, and then natural language processing long time ago. And I see that we are learning just about training data and testing data, but not calibrating data. And that's a huge mistake because it's not just about training and testing and how my accuracy of a classification problem works. It's about basically how do I calibrate the risk inside the model. So I have to set this risk approach inside any machine learning model. And then, very important, how do I apply this model to the real world? Let's say cybersecurity. What is my real scenario? It's not about that this is doing, night-based training and I'm doing anti-spam. Okay, I want to know, okay, but how can I put this in a real scenario, such as uh, identity, how to say,
Management and access management.
no, fooling identity. I forget this identity supplantation. Is that sorry, I forgot the term in English.
Yeah,
I'm
it's okay.
changing, identity. I'm changing the identity of someone. I'm replacing identity of someone. How do I work there? That's a real scenario to me, operational scenario and legal scenario. So how can I adapt my model to that, to identity theft? I remember. Sorry, I remember
Yeah.
the word.
Yeah.
So that's my real scenario, identity theft, and we do that in cybersecurity, right? Our professional cybersecurity, we do that there. But from the data science, there's not yet this vision of how can I put it in an operational risk scenario. And that happens a lot today with artificial intelligence risk management, because you have AI hallucinations. Okay, what kind of hallucinations? Let's go there. Or adversarial machine learning, such as data poisoning. So let's put the model there. And this is something missing today, and it's big thing. Finally, I would say that there are the trends, important trends, and one of them I think it's also blockchain, right? Blockchain is very interesting because, um, yeah, despite that it's, I mean, we use it for financial stuff, buying tokens, selling tokens, and a lot of different things. Even today, we have proof of identity, proof of authority, not only as before, proof of stake and proof of work. But very important here because is it that secure, really? Is it really relevant for my cybersecurity problem using blockchain? How can I solve with it? How can I comply with privacy management with blockchain? Perhaps I cannot delete data and data just stays there forever. So many things we need to also think. So it's a huge challenge, but I think mostly we need to adapt to the changes, and that sometimes does not mean creating new methodologies by people that is not risk expert. Is perhaps going back to the risk fundamentals I need to estimate. And in data science, anything you do that surpasses new hypothesis is good. You are somehow getting more information. Remember always that risk management is for getting informed decisions. Yes, that is the idea of risk management, getting a clear panorama and they take decisions with information that supports my decision. That is the idea of risk management, right? So we need to fix that too. And it's in the privacy domain, it's really complicated because, as I say, there are a lot of experts from privacy domain that are unfortunately are not really doing it. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for this very productive conversation in terms of risk and privacy and how they're all bundled into one and how an organization should ensure that they maintain security. Any parting shots for our guests?
Nothing. Just thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm looking forward, of course, to keep this weekly program, this weekly podcasts, and keep doing that. And to the people, just think about that privacy and information security are together. You cannot put them separate. You have to manage them together. That's the right way. Is we have to do in this new era. Okay, and think about how much that it costs. That's very important too. It's not just about creating, subjective labels and say, okay, this is low, medium, high. No, it's not about that. It's how do I put the values inside my risk analysis. That's the most important thing. Because you are not only dealing with assets, you are dealing with the rights and freedoms of people. And that is somehow very, very important, maybe even more important than the other side. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Thank you. And
Thank
with
you.
that, we'll have to end there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Good.